There's a reason why a ton of media outlets are predicting the OKC Thunder to make an appearance in the 2025 NBA Finals. Looking at it, last season, only one team had a better record than the Thunder, only one team outscored opponents by more points per 100 possessions, and only one other team joined OKC in the top 5 of both offensive and defensive efficiency, and that team was the Boston Celtics, who just won the NBA title. Well, sure, this OKC team who will enter the 2025 season with the league's youngest roster might not match the Boston Celtics in terms of statistical resume, but it's worth remembering that while Boston beat the Dallas Mavericks, who eliminated the Thunder in the second round of the playoffs, the Mavs and Thunder series was so close, to the point that both teams were dead even in points scored throughout those 6 games, with 3 of those games being decided by 4 points or less, including Game 6 wherein Dallas needed free throws from PJ Washington with 2 seconds left in the game to edge out OKC. Basically, despite Dallas' tight defense limiting OKC's drive and kick game, despite non-SGA Thunder players missing nearly 70% of their 3-point attempts in that series, and despite PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. putting up the best outside shooting numbers of their careers in those 6 games, the Thunder were still very close to winning. And then suddenly, Thunder GM Sam Presti just went out this offseason and plugged the biggest holes in their roster. He addressed Josh Giddey's shaky fit with the starting lineup by replacing him with Alex Caruso, who not only happens to be a better and higher volume outside shooter, but who also happens to be one of the best multi-positional defenders in the entire NBA, and who knows what it takes to be a championship level role player. OKC also needed some added size and muscle in the interior, and they addressed that by signing Isaiah Hartenstein, who isn't only one of the best rim protectors and rebounders in the entire league, but is also an excellent screener and a highly advanced playmaker who should add a different dynamic to OKC's offense to make it less predictable than before. Well, as a Thunder fan myself, I tried to objectively find flaws in this current roster's composition, but OKC is just clearly at least a top 2 team in the West barring any major injury, and frankly, the only thing that might take them out of the NBA title mix would be a serious injury to superstar Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. This OKC team just looks deep enough to survive injuries to anyone else on the roster. There's no question that the Thunder's championship window is now wide open, but again, as a Thunder fan, what I'm actually wondering about is, how long could this SGA era of the Thunder last, and can GM Sam Presti actually extend this OKC team's championship window relative to the NBA standard? So what's good everyone, it's Real Balls here, and let's talk about all of those in this video. So let's get to it. Last offseason, the NBA implemented the new collective bargaining agreement, which introduced the second apron with a goal of establishing balance around the league. Well, for the upcoming 2024 to 2025 season, a team is considered to fall under the second apron once their payroll reaches at least $18 million above the tax threshold, subject to adjustment each year. And basically, these second apron teams are bound to face harsh penalties and restrictions in terms of roster building. First, in the trade market, second apron teams can't send out multiple players in a single trade, they can't send out cash in any player deal, and they also can't sign and trade their own players. But also in free agency, second apron teams can't use their mid-level exception to sign players even in the buyout market. Further, once a team falls under the second apron for more than 2 seasons in a 5-year period, that team's own first-round draft pick 7 years in the future actually gets frozen and can no longer be used or traded. It doesn't matter whether you're a big market or a small market team, these second apron penalties apply to every franchise. And as a response, we've already seen how teams are reorienting their roster building approach to avoid the second apron, although these adjustments have been most apparent among contending teams that have a lot of top-heavy talent on expensive contracts. We've already seen the Minnesota Timberwolves trade Karl Anthony-Towns to build a more financially flexible roster around Anthony Edwards. We've seen the Denver Nuggets lose another championship-caliber role player for the second year in a row in order to keep the Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray tandem intact without them having to dip in the second apron too early. And while the Boston Celtics won the championship thanks to their trades for Porzingis and Drew Holiday, with all the huge contracts they have in their roster, as early as the 2025 offseason, Boston will be forced to trim down their payroll if they want to avoid getting hit by second apron penalties a year later. Meanwhile, the 2024 OKC Thunder team was basically an outlier in the sense that they were still able to build a contender type of roster despite the new CBA limitations, due to the fact that much of OKC's top talent are still under cheap rookie contracts. But then, what happens when those players are out of their rookie contracts and when a small market team like the Thunder have to start paying those guys at the market rate? In the past, Sam Presti was already forced to trade a future MVP MVP and James Harden for salary cap purposes. So I think the question for this new era Thunder team is, how high can their payroll go, and if it can't get high enough, who will that actually cost? Well, diving into the Thunder's salary situation, you could see that the team's immediate core is pretty much locked up for the foreseeable future. Shai is under contract for the next 3 years until 2027 without any options. Lu Dort has a team option worth $18 million for that 2027 season, while Isaiah Hartenstein has a much bigger $28.5 million team option that same year. Isaiah Joe is also under contract until 2027, while Aaron Wiggins is locked up until 2028. Meanwhile, J-Dub and Chet Holmgren, the two most vital non-SGA Thunder players, are currently both halfway into their rookie contracts. OKC will be able to extend them as early as next offseason, or the team can wait until the summer of 2026 to re-sign them as restricted free agents. But either way, both guys are expected to receive max extensions. Now, the only core player whose contract comes up in unrestricted free agency before Shai's contract is up in 3 years is Alex Caruso, whose deal will expire next summer. But Sam Presti already said in the wake of trading for him that signing Caruso to a new contract would be a priority once his extension eligible in December of 2024. And based on NBA salary projections, that new contract could go as high as $78.8 million for 4 years, or more than $19 million per year, which contract should run until the 2029 season, which will be the second year of Shai's new contract. So now you gotta wonder, will there actually be salary cap trouble for OKC once Chet and J-Dub's second contract start to kick in during the summer of 2026? Well, as it currently stands, the team's salary for that 2026 to 2027 season is already at $130 million. Assuming 10% growth, the salary cap for that season should be set around $170 million, with the second apron being roughly around $228 million. Now, assuming that neither Chet nor J-Dub makes an All-NBA team or wins MVP the next 2 seasons, their max starting salary for 2026 to 2027 would be around $42 million each. Then let's say Caruso gets his projected $19 million per year contract, and when you add the team's remaining salaries, that already puts OKC's payroll around $5 million above the second apron for the 2027 season, without even mentioning that such amount is also way above the luxury tax line. Well, of course, OKC is already expected to be a luxury tax team by that time, but entering second apron territory could just really cause salary cap heartburn for a relatively low revenue NBA market team like the Thunder. But the good thing is, there are actually outs for OKC if needed. Even if Sam Presti can't negotiate down the price of new deals for Chet, J-Dub, and Caruso, again, Hartenstein has a huge $28.5 million team option for the 2026 to 2027 season, and declining that team option immediately gives OKC a ton of financial breathing room. Also, for that same season, Lu Dort has a smaller $18 million team option, while Kenrich Williams also has his own $7 million team option, assuming he's still around by that time. Unloading those contracts could also be another play if OKC really needs to cut their payroll. Well, for sure, letting go of core players like Hartenstein or Lu Dort 2 years from now will highly depend on how comfortable OKC will be by that time in terms of supplementing them in their rotation with a more developed version of Cason Wallace or Ousmane Dieng, assuming those guys get signed to long-term extensions. But all in all, I think it's safe to say that even if all these contracts come in at the top of their max range, OKC should still have the flexibility to maintain its main core up until that 2026 to 2027 season without much pain, even with the big races for Chet and J-Dub. The worst case scenario is that they have to unload Hartenstein's third-year team option, but this team won 57 games without him, and they have a ton of young players primed to continue improving based on age and experience. Overall, this OKC core should be together for at least the next 3 seasons easily. But then the bigger question is, what happens past 2027? Given salary cap growth assumptions, SGA's new contract that will kick in during the 2027 to 2028 season could start at $65 million. That huge $25 million jump in his salary could start to cause some cap issues for the team, especially if Chet and J-Dub are on max deals in the $45 million range during that 2028 season, as Shai, Chet, and J-Dub would already make a combined $155 million for that season alone, and with a second apron set around $250 million by that time, and with a second contract for Cason Wallace also kicking in that same year, keeping players like a 28-year-old Lu Dort and a 29-year-old Hartenstein could be difficult for OKC. Then there's also the possibility that OKC's cap number may shrink once the NBA officially adds 2 new expansion teams 2 years from now. Once that happens, OKC will then get a smaller cut of league revenue and potentially face a tighter salary cap, as the allotted player share of revenue gets spread among 32 teams instead of the usual 30 teams. Well, for sure, with the Thunder's new public-funded arena opening soon, the team's local revenue base will definitely grow, but that growth most likely won't be felt until a few years after SGA's new contract kicks in by the 2027 to 2028 season, which is when OKC is gonna be experiencing the first crucial payroll crunch point of this team's new era. Again, at this point, we're talking about the 2027 offseason and the 2028 trade deadline, wherein Shai will already be 29, J-Dub will be 26, and Chet will be 25. Basically, this is gonna be when OKC's big three will be right around or entering their prime years. And by that time, Sam Presti will have a much better sense of what a team centered around their big three or potentially even Cason Wallace or even Nikola Topic looks like. But then again, the problem is, by that time, keeping all the complementary talent surrounding OKC's big three will not be financially feasible given the restrictions of the second apron. This is now when you could see the value of the 17 first-round picks that OKC has control over until 2031. Using those picks, the Thunder will have the chance to land high-level players and cheap rookie contracts to eventually replace expensive core pieces, to make sure that their big three is sustainably surrounded by a winning roster right at the heart of their primes. Overall, the worst fear for Thunder fans could be that the payroll crunch that's about to come in 2027 could lead Sam Presti to do what he did with James Harden back in 2012, which is trading a young star he didn't feel comfortable paying max salary. But looking at it, neither Chet Holmgren nor J-Dub replicate Shai in the way James Harden overlapped with Russell Westbrook 12 years ago. Right now, the Thunder have a big three that seems to complement each other's skill sets really well, and that overall just seems worth building around for a very long time. For sure, we don't know what this team's ceiling looks like, but what the 2024 Thunder were able to accomplish was just basically unheard of for young NBA teams. Well, according to Basketball Index's data, last season's Thunder team with an average age of 23.4 years old had the 15th youngest roster among all 1,320 teams during the NBA's post-merger era. And among all those 1,320 teams, the 2024 Thunder actually ranked first overall in Basketball Index's wins above age-derived expectation metric, which just illustrates how this SGA-led Thunder broke the standard on how much young teams are supposed to win compared to expectations. But then also last season, the 2024 Thunder became the youngest NBA roster to ever win a playoff series over the last 40 years, coincidentally breaking the previous record held by the 2011 Thunder led by the Durant, Westbrook, and Harden Big Three. Well, for sure, that 2011 Thunder team made it all the way to the conference finals before being defeated by the eventual champion Dallas Mavericks. But then, that was already that team's second time in the playoffs, as they've already made the first round the year before. So who says this current OKC team can't at least make the conference finals in their second year in the playoffs as well? Well, for sure, SGA isn't Kevin Durant, J-Dub isn't Russell Westbrook, but with all due respect to guys like Serge Ibaka, Steven Adams, and Andre Robertson, the rest of this current OKC team is already better than those post-James Harden Thunder teams that made the conference finals twice in 3 seasons and who nearly beat the 73-9 Golden State Warriors. There's obviously a scenario here in which this current era of Thunder basketball has a higher ceiling, longer runway, and more success than the golden era of Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. It's just that right now, Sam Presti has seemingly already organized the books to let the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander era Thunder compete for NBA titles for multiple years and maybe even for the rest of the decade. So thank you guys. If you've actually made it this far into the video, feel free to drop your thoughts in the comment section below, and please do me a favor by hitting that like button if you've actually enjoyed this one. And also, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing as well. Again, this is Real Balls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.